You read that right. Today, we are going to see how accepting the worst case scenario is often going to lead to the best outcome. What's up everyone, Antonio here, and I'm passionate about self-improvement. I truly believe that you can overcome any problem you have in your life with a little bit of action. Let's get into the story of how I accepted the worst situation and got the best out of it. So this is back a little over 3 years ago. I quit my job, my first job as a software developer. I decided to move back home. I left my job in order to work on my side business and to try to get a better job, one that I really enjoyed. At that time, I was in my first relationship. We had been dating for about 2.5 years. So, I mean, for me, I would consider that pretty serious. We were also doing long distance, medium distance. We lived in 2 different states, but they were near each other. The distance and lack of seeing each other and communication was hurting us. It was putting a strain on us, some stress. So one day, I'm on the phone with her and she was needing to move. So she asked me to help her move. Now, I have very limited time, so what I told her was, I will help you move, but I'll only help you move the big things. I can't be there for the whole weekend to move every little thing. And she got angry at me. What else is new? So while we were on the phone, she hung up in my face. A whole day went by, she would not return any of my calls or text messages. Then it turned into 2 days, then to 3 days, then into weeks. In the end, it took 33 days. Now, if you can imagine, my ex-girlfriend was someone that was very important to me at the time. We were talking every single day. I would share almost everything that happened in my life with her, and I would learn everything about her. I considered her as part of my family, and she considered me as part of hers. And now, over this, what seemed like a little argument to me, turned into her completely ignoring me. If you can imagine, I was hurt and I was lost and I had no idea where to turn. And it was at this point in my life that I noticed a couple things that could help me get back on track. First, every morning when I woke up and when I went to bed, in order to be able to sleep and take the focus off of that situation, I had to write out my thoughts. I used what I call notebook sessions. I took out my notebook and I wrote exactly how I felt. I was writing out how I was feeling, how I was improving, things that I can do to better the situation, what was going on in my head. Each time I sat there, and as I wrote, I started understanding more and more of my own thoughts and more of what was going on in the situation. Understanding how I felt allowed me to cope with my feelings and become better with it. Everything just started making sense. I came to the realization that because I cared for her so much and she decided to treat me like this, which is the exact opposite of how I would like to be treated in a relationship in which I cared so much about someone else, to not even communicate with me when I was reaching out to her, I was being hurt even more. Every day that went by, I was being hurt. I was putting in more and more and getting less and less. After a couple of these notebook sessions, I started just asking myself, what's the worst that can happen? So I started answering that question over and over and over again. The worst case scenario started to seem not that bad at all. It was a combination of me realizing that I had more time to myself. I survived without her in my life before the 2.5 years, so I can survive in my life without her again. I will have less stress due to the long distance affecting us, and it would allow me, she didn't really support my goals, so it was good for me to have more time and less of a negative influence on me supporting my goals. Each day that passed, I would get no response. And I felt more and more okay with that worst case scenario. At this point, I almost started wanting the worst case scenario. As soon as I accepted that the worst case was gonna happen, a few things changed. I started to be able to focus a lot more because I knew making her respond to me was out of my control. So instead of wasting my time just sitting there waiting for her to respond, I decided to take action to better my situation. The taking action now allowed me to make progress, and that gave me confidence, and that confidence compounded into more and more confidence. During the fight, my confidence was at an all-time low. It felt like I had one of my huge pillars in my life knocked out from underneath me. So I started accepting different areas where I made mistakes in the relationship. I was able to find lessons learned and ways I can correct them in the future. Knowing that I'd be able to correct my own mistakes in the future allowed me to have this brand new sense of control over the situation and my future well-being. So as I mentioned earlier, it turned out that about a month later, 33 days to be exact, as you can tell, this scarred me a little bit, she reached out to me. She asked to hang out and talk. At this point in my mind, I had accepted the worst case scenario, because if you're not gonna talk to me for this long, I'm assuming we're broken up. So I told her I didn't want to meet up and I was fine on my own. And she continued to break up with me over text message. But here's the thing, I was not that hurt when it actually happened. Yeah, it hurt a little bit to see it finally happen, but I already had come to terms with the worst case scenario. I had an expectation of that happening, so my mind was okay with it by the time it actually did. That expectation allowed me to not be blindsided and not be surprised by what was to come. So why am I telling you this? I think you need to accept the worst case scenario as soon as something bad happens. If you can accept it and be prepared for it when it happens, in most cases, it rarely does happen. But when it does happen and you're prepared for it, you are so much more ready to deal with the emotional stress that comes in. And you have prepared physically, mentally, psychologically, all of these things, financially in some cases, to prevent it from happening again. If your expectations were so much higher and you expected to stay together and everything would be fine, you would probably be really hurt by getting broken up with because you didn't think anything would have happened. Look, if you enjoyed this story about my life, I suggest we keep hanging out. Check out the video here or the video there and make sure to subscribe and follow along with videos like this every single week. Remember guys, no matter what you are facing, you can overcome it with a little bit of action.